There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely, the soldiers of the 137th Separate Marine Battalion and the 35th Separate Marine Brigade demonstrated exceptional skill. The video begins with 3 Russian intelligence officers returning from a combat mission, looking for a place to stay for the night and deciding to stay in a destroyed house. They believe that this place will be safe in their opinion. If the house has already been destroyed, then it is unlikely that an attack will land there again. In addition, a destroyed house attracts less attention than a whole one, which helps them hide from the eyes of the Ukrainian military and local residents. He also heads towards the house and ends up in another destroyed window. An even more powerful explosion occurs. The house collapses like a house of cards, covering 3 Russian intelligence officers with rubble. The fighters of the 126th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Air Patrol Unit showed an impressive moment when a Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone struck a Russian car in a garage where 2 Russian military men were located in the city of Novaya Kakhovka. This moment was recorded by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, and the operators realized that it made sense to attack when they got into the car, so they could immediately destroy both transport and military personnel. That's pretty much how it all turned out. The Russian military got into the car and began to start it slowly. Ukrainian drone operators took advantage of this pause by launching Avdiivka kamikaze drones. The video begins with a Ukrainian drone spotting 3 Russian intelligence officers. These soldiers are inspecting houses in a small village, clearly trying to find a suitable shelter for organizing a stronghold and overnight stay. The scouts carefully inspect several buildings and eventually select a 2-story house that they believe will provide them with good protection and visibility of the area. As the scouts enter the house and begin to settle in, the drone operator begins the attack. The drone camera shows the drone slowly approaching the building and then deftly flying through a broken window on the ground floor. A Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone struck a Russian car in which the commanding staff of one of the units was located in the city of Novaya Kakhovka. The video begins with the Russian commander saying goodbye to his colleagues near a military unit. Then he gets into the car where 2 military men are already waiting for him. The car slowly moves away and heads to one of the local courtyards. The car can be seen slowly moving through the narrow streets until it finally stops at one of the houses. This moment becomes critical as Ukrainian drone operators decide to take action. A Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone flies up to the car. Suddenly, there is a powerful explosion. The car is instantly engulfed in flames and thick smoke rises into the sky. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the attack drone company demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle along with its crew came under attack from an Avdiivka drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone approaching a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, which is firing intensely at Ukrainian military positions in one of the villages near Marinka. Drone operators carefully coordinate their actions to inflict maximum damage on the enemy. The video shows how the drone approaches the infantry fighting vehicle and delivers an accurate strike. A moment later, a powerful explosion is heard, followed by the ignition of ammunition. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military managed to destroy 2 Russian Buk-3 anti-aircraft missile systems using a HIMARS multiple launch rocket system in the suburbs of the city of Settlers. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting 2 Russian Buk anti-aircraft missile systems. These complexes were deployed to protect nearby units of the Brigade and Airborne Division headquarters of the Russian troops, and soon suffers the same fate, namely, the HIMARS missiles hit it with such accuracy that there is no chance of rescue or repair. The units of the Brigade and Airborne Division headquarters protected by these complexes also turned out to be vulnerable to subsequent attacks, which further demoralized the enemy forces. The video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movements of 5 Russian special forces. They move carefully down the street, clearly trying not to attract attention. The special forces are heading to an ordinary civilian house, which they plan to use as a temporary deployment point. The video shows how the blast wave shakes the house, knocking out doors and windows. Dust and debris fly in all directions. The special forces who were near the front door find themselves at the epicenter of the explosion. There is no exact information about the condition of the Russian soldiers after the explosion, but it is safe to say that they were seriously injured and possibly killed. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the paratroopers of the 77th Separate Airmobile Brigade, using an FPV drone, inflicted serious damage to the Russian Turam-2 anti-aircraft missile system. The video begins with the Ukrainian FPV drone already in flight, heading towards its target. It was a specially equipped drone with an extended range, capable of covering significant distances and performing complex tasks. The footage shows how the drone approaches the Russian Turam-2 air defense system, which is actively rotating the radar to detect Ukrainian targets. This means that the complex was active and ready for battle. The Russian Turam-2 air defense system, in theory, could jam the signal of the Ukrainian drone used to detect and attack it. When the drone reaches the complex, a powerful explosion occurs. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Bulava and the Shadow unit demonstrated an impressive moment. When two Russian attack aircraft tried to hide under their damaged armored vehicles from the attack of Ukrainian FPV drones. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting three Russian attack aircraft hiding in a disabled armored vehicle. Realizing that they were being pursued by Ukrainian FPV drones, they were afraid to come out of hiding. At some point, one of them noticed that a Ukrainian drone was following them, and they realized that the situation was becoming critical. After a short discussion, the two of them decided to hide under the armored vehicle, believing that the drone would not be able to fly under it and would be more vulnerable inside. The third Russian soldier decided to stay inside the armored vehicle, considering it safer. As soon as two Russian soldiers climbed under the armored vehicle, a Ukrainian FPV drone began to attack. The drone quickly flew inside the armored vehicle and caused a powerful explosion. The Russian soldier who remained inside instantly found himself at the center of the explosion, and his fate was sealed. Two attack aircraft hiding under an armored vehicle also felt the effects of the explosion. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 35th Separate Marine Brigade destroyed a large command post of the Russian invaders in the village of Urshenoy with two high-precision aerial bombs, Avdiivka and ACE. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces destroyed a large base of the Russian occupiers with high-precision Western Avdiivka and ASM bombs. More precisely, the Ukrainian military destroyed a large command post where they made important decisions on the defense of nearby settlements. Russian combat vehicles were also stored and serviced nearby, and an ammunition depot was located. And it is obvious that the operators of the unmanned aerial vehicle transmitted the coordinates of the target to the calculation of the multiple launch rocket system. And the projectile guided by the coordinates hit exactly the building with the occupiers in one of the captured settlements. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely fighters of the 126th Separate Brigade of the Territorial Defense Forces and the 79th Border Detachment showed the moment how, with the help of FPV drones, they destroyed the positions of Russian drone operators who were launching their FPV drones from the balcony. The Ukrainian military reportedly showed drone footage of Russian drone operators hiding in one of the houses of local residents. Further, in the footage shown, we can see how one Russian drone operator goes out onto the balcony and launches his FPV drone in an unknown direction. After this, the Ukrainian military begins an attack using an FPV drone, which strikes the balcony of the house where the Russian FPV drone operators are hiding. He was followed by several more strikes on different balconies, where there were also Russian military personnel. As a result, after being hit by an FPV drone, a powerful explosion occurs, as a result of which the explosion causes heavy damage to all Russian operators who were hiding in the house of local residents. After the explosion, everyone was injured, after which they no longer posed a threat to the Ukrainian military. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 15th Separate Artillery Reconnaissance Brigade Black Forest managed to destroy the Russian Buk anti-aircraft missile system using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting a Russian Buk missile system consisting of two vehicles. The first vehicle is a transport loading installation, the second is a radar station, which works in tandem with the main complex. The complex was located in an open area, where it was as if in the palm of the hand of a Ukrainian drone. Without wasting any time, the scout transmitted the coordinates of the complex to the HIMARS Morse operators. A moment later, HIMARS made a precise strike at the indicated coordinates. First, the strike hit the radar station. The explosion was powerful, and you can see how the station instantly goes out of order. Then, the second strike hits the transport loading installation. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of a company of attack unmanned aerial vehicles demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying the positions of the invaders. From where fire was fired from an anti-tank missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian military near Avdiivka. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting 6 Russian soldiers holed up in an industrial building. These military personnel installed an anti-tank missile system on the second floor of the building, occupying a strategically advantageous position. The dominant height allowed them to conduct targeted fire on Ukrainian positions, and the enemies felt safe, confident that no one would notice them. The footage shows a Ukrainian FPV drone approaching the building, maneuvering towards one of the destroyed windows. The precision of the piloting is impressive, and the drone deftly flies in heading straight towards the position of the anti-tank missile system. A powerful explosion destroys the room where the Russian military were located. Smoke and debris fly out in all directions, indicating the accuracy and effectiveness of the attack. The fate of the 6 soldiers after the explosion remains unknown, but the likelihood of their rescue is minimal. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt Company unit, as part of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a 2-story house with Russian military personnel inside using an FPV drone with an enlarged warhead. The video reportedly begins with 3 Russian soldiers entering through a door into a destroyed 2-story house. They just managed to settle down on the floor when a Ukrainian FPV drone flies after them through the same door, and a powerful explosion occurs. As a result, the right side of the house collapses, burying the Russian military, who tried to fortify themselves in this building under the rubble. The footage shows the hand of one of the Russian soldiers rising from the rubble, apparently in the hope of help. However, no one is there to save him. At this time, the second Ukrainian FPV drone begins to circle around the house, trying to detect the third Russian military man. Having detected the target, the drone rushes through the door of the first floor, and another explosion occurs. Now the left side of the house also begins to collapse, completely destroying the building. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Taistra attack drone company of the 10th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing force of 9 people came under attack from an FPV drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle slowly moving across a field. On board there is a landing force of 9 Russian soldiers. Apparently, they are preparing to attack Ukrainian positions or strengthen their defense lines. However, the enemy's plans were thwarted thanks to the prompt actions of Ukrainian fighters. Ukrainian drone operators notice the Avdiivka and quickly decide to launch an FPV drone with a warhead. As the drone approaches its target, Russian soldiers begin to realize the threat, but there is no time to react. The drone hits the BMP with precision, and a powerful explosion occurs. The camera records the moment of detonation, and you can see how the infantry fighting vehicle breaks into pieces. Shrapnel and smoke rise into the air, indicating the power of the blow. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the pilots of attack drones of the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with infantry tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line near the village of Avdiivka, but was destroyed with the help of Avdiivka drones. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle accompanied by a group of armored soldiers on top. When the Russian infantry fighting vehicle was in the affected area, the Ukrainian pilots decided to attack. Using FPV drones equipped with explosive devices, they carried out a precise strike against armored vehicles and soldiers. The first drone successfully reached its target, causing an explosion that disabled the infantry fighting vehicle and scattered the infantry. The explosion was so powerful that the armored vehicle instantly caught fire, and Russian soldiers began to run away in panic. The video shows how the second FPV drone rushes towards the target, finishing off those who tried to take cover after the first strike. The explosion of the second drone was no less destructive than the first. Ukrainian pilots acted quickly and decisively, not giving the enemy a chance to regroup or counterattack. Russian soldiers, deprived of support and equipment, found themselves in a hopeless situation. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the Ukrainian military managed to destroy the rare Russian Sket-Q electronic warfare system using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. The video begins with the Russian Svet-Q complex being redeployed from one area to another. He drives into a densely populated forest, which would seem to be a good shelter from Ukrainian drones. However, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones continue to monitor the movement of the complex. At some point, the complex stops and the deployment of all systems begins. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military understands that they need to act immediately. In theory, the Russian complex could jam the signal of the Ukrainian drone, which records its movement. Meanwhile, the coordinates of the Svet-Q deployment site are transmitted to the base, and a decision is made to strike with the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. A moment later, HIMARS makes a precise strike at the specified coordinates. A powerful explosion occurs that completely destroys the Russian complex. At the end of the video you can see the result of the impact, namely, only the frame remains of the complex without systems, antennas, and all other equipment. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Bulava and the Shadow Unit demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian infantry fighting vehicle which was on its way to evacuate its wounded comrades. This additional protection in the form of a welded iron barbecue onto the armor received its name among the military for its external resemblance to this item. The purpose of such a barbecue is to repel attacks from anti-tank missile systems, but in practice it turned out to be ineffective. Not much time passed before the Ukrainian military, noticing the movement of the infantry fighting vehicles, decided to use the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The rocket launch was accurate and confident. The moment the missile hit the target, a powerful explosion occurred. The crew of the Russian infantry fighting vehicle tried to escape and scattered, but the evacuation of the wounded for which they were heading now became impossible. Until a new evacuation vehicle arrives, the wounded Russian soldiers may not survive to receive help, making their losses even more significant. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed the tank of the invaders from the Javelin anti-tank missile system, which was trying to leave the affected area. It is reported that the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed the Russian tanked 80B from the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The video shows the result, namely the tank is on fire. Based on this video, we can conclude that the crew members remained in the tank forever. The video was filmed by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found targets at an enemy stronghold, transmitted the exact coordinates, and recorded the results of the shots. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, fighters of the 126th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Cord Unit successfully neutralized the threat with the help of a kamikaze drone emanating from a Russian mortar located on the site of a local resident. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the location of a Russian mortar on a local resident's property. The Russian military can be seen setting up a firing position right in the middle of a civilian house, hoping that this will help them hide from Ukrainian attacks. The mortar was carefully camouflaged, and the Russians were confident that no one would detect them. The footage shows a kamikaze drone approaching the mortar position, deftly maneuvering between trees and buildings. High-precision piloting and the latest technology allowed the operator to accurately point the drone at the target. As soon as the drone reached the mortar position, a powerful explosion occurred. As a result of the operation, the mortar was successfully destroyed, and several Russian military personnel who were within the affected radius were also wounded. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian self-propelled gun from HIMARS and a truck with ammunition that was unloading ammunition for Russian artillery. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the movements of Russian troops. The footage shows a truck approaching the self-propelled artillery unit to unload ammunition for further firing at Ukrainian positions. The Russian military begins unloading shells from the back of a truck and moving them to a field warehouse. The Ukrainian military understands that this is the ideal moment to attack. While Russian soldiers are busy unloading, it is possible to simultaneously destroy both the self-propelled guns and the ammunition truck with one precise shot from the HIMARS. This is followed by the moment of attack, where a powerful volley of HIMARS accurately hits the target. An explosion occurs and the truck, which still contains unloaded ammunition, instantly bursts into flames. The flame quickly engulfs the entire vehicle, and the detonation of ammunition boxes begins. Explosions are heard and seen as shells begin to explode one after another. The flame spreads, and soon the self-propelled artillery unit itself begins to burn. The detonation of ammunition increases the destructive effect, causing significant losses to Russian forces. A strong explosion and subsequent burning turn all the equipment into a pile of scrap metal. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine dealt a powerful blow to the military equipment of the Russians and personnel. It is reported that in the south of Ukraine one of the examples of a successful counter-battery fight of our artillerymen took place. They destroyed an enemy 150mm self-propelled artillery Mount Hyacinths and 2 Ural trucks with ammunition shells for it. This happened at a firing position in one of the forest plantations, where the enemy was going to fire these shells at the positions of our defenders, but did not have time. The video was filmed by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found targets at a powerful enemy stronghold in a forest plantation, transmitted the exact coordinates to the fighters, and recorded the results of the shots. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the pilots of attack drones of the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, together with infantry, tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line near the village of Avdiivka, and was destroyed thanks to the precise actions of Ukrainian sappers. The video reportedly shows a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, accompanied by infantry, moving towards Ukrainian positions, trying to break through the defenses. The Ukrainian military was prepared for such a scenario. The second attempt at an enemy offensive took place near the village of Avdiivka, where Ukrainian sappers demonstrated a high level of training and coordination. Ukrainian sappers, using advanced technologies, remotely activated the TM-62 anti-tank mine using the Vampire hexacopter. The footage clearly shows how the hexacopter hovers over the battlefield, monitoring the movement of Russian equipment and infantry. At the moment when the Russian infantry fighting vehicle approached the pre-installed mine, the sappers activated the charge. The instant explosion destroyed the infantry fighting vehicle, preventing an enemy breakthrough and protecting Ukrainian positions. After the destruction of the BAMP, the Russian infantry, left without support, tried to disperse and take cover. However, the attack drone pilots continued the operation, delivering precision strikes against fleeing enemy soldiers. This moment was cut from the video so as not to traumatize viewers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters from a separate special electronic support center demonstrated an impressive attack on a Russian minibus carrying drone operators and their equipment. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting a minibus parked east of the village of Opitnoy. Several Russian drone operators can be seen loading their equipment, provisions, and other items necessary for work into the vehicle. Ukrainian operators, noticing this activity, quickly decide to strike the minibus to destroy valuable equipment and possibly kill some Russian soldiers. A Ukrainian FPV drone equipped with a warhead rushes towards the target. The drone's camera shows it rapidly approaching the minibus, which continues to be loaded with equipment. Russians, busy with their own affairs, do not notice the threat until it is too late. The explosion hits the vehicle and the soldiers surrounding it, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. A minibus full of valuable equipment turns into a pile of scrap metal. The explosion also hits several Russian soldiers standing nearby. The drones and other equipment that were in the vehicle were destroyed, significantly weakening the capabilities of Russian drone operators in the area. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely a tank battle took place, where, during the breakthrough of our defense, a Wagner tank was blown up, which in pairs tried to attack our positions in the Bakhmut area. It is reported that fighters of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade showed a moment of a tank battle near Bakhmut, where a Wagnerian tank exploded, which in pairs tried to attack our positions. The Russian tank that was traveling at the head of the column blew up, presumably on an anti-tank mine, which is why it was included in the morning report of the General Staff on destroyed equipment. There is a very high probability that the Ukrainian soldiers planted anti-tank mines on the road in the rear of the aggressor in advance, knowing through intelligence that the enemy would later use this route to break through our defenses. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the Security Service of Ukraine demonstrated an impressive moment when the Russian heavy flamethrower system Solnspek was destroyed by a Ukrainian FPV drone without having time to take a firing position. The events took place in one of the villages in the vicinity of the Avdiivka agglomeration. The Russian Solnspek system was moving along a narrow village road heading towards a pre-prepared firing position. At that moment, she was noticed by Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. Realizing the serious threat that this flamethrower system posed, the Ukrainian military decided to attack it from the air. The FPV drone operator receives the command to attack. The drone's camera tracks the target, moving closer and closer until a precise and powerful strike occurs. A moment later there is an explosion, and the detonation of ammunition begins. The footage shows a huge fireball that the flamethrower system turned into. Debris scatters and thick black smoke rises into the sky. The last frames show that all that was left of the powerful car was a charred frame. The detonation of ammunition and the impact of the drone did their job, namely, the sunshine can no longer be restored. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the Battalion of Attack Unmanned Aerial Vehicles Achilles showed video footage where, with the help of FPV drones, they destroyed a Russian Ural truck on which a cannon was destroyed in order to destroy Ukrainian drones or drones in the sky. The footage reportedly shows a Russian truck driving slowly along a country road towards its firing position, where it is supposed to shoot down Ukrainian drones. At the moment when the truck had almost reached its target, the Ukrainian military launched an Avdiivka drone which flies up to the back of the truck, where 3 Russian military men are seen sitting, serving as a crew operating a cannon installed to combat drones. The next second there is an accurate strike. The following shows the moment of the attack, after which the Russian truck begins to burn and smoke. And then a clip of Avdiivka drone attacks on Russian trucks is shown, but without guns in the back. Some trucks carried personnel, and some carried ammunition and provisions. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment of destruction of several units of enemy multiple rocket launchers Hurricane and the moment of detonation of ammunition near the destroyed enemy equipment. It is reported that the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed a video shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found the target, corrected the fire on it and recorded the result, namely powerful explosions with the scattering of shells from the Uragan multiple launch rocket system. In the first episode, a column of military equipment of the occupiers stopped on the road in the captured settlement. There were 3 arrivals, as a result of which the first 5 cars burned down. Then a battery of multiple launch rocket systems Hurricane with escort vehicles and ammunition was busy near the forest plantation. 2 cars came under distribution along with the Uragan multiple launch rocket system, and the other 2 left the shelling, turned around at the crossroads to another landing, but they were also covered by artillery there. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment how, with the help of a kamikaze drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders from which fire was fired at the positions of our defenders. It is reported that the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine neutralized a group of Russian invaders with a kamikaze drone Switchblade, at the same time eliminating 1 and injuring 3 invaders. There is a corresponding video filmed by 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, namely the Observer and the kamikaze drone itself. First, footage from a drone is shown, where you can see how a kamikaze drone explodes on the occupiers. Then, death footage of the drone itself is shown. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the fighters of the attack drone company and the 77th Airmobile Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing force of 5 people came under attack from an Avdiivka drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle east of the village of Pestanoy. The vehicle slowly moves across the field, carrying a landing force of 5 Russian soldiers who clearly do not expect an attack. The first Avdiivka drone quickly approaches the target and hits the map, causing an explosion. However, despite the powerful blow, the armored vehicle continues to move by inertia and stops only after it hits a forest belt. It would seem that the attack might not bring the desired result, but the Ukrainian fighters do not stop there. A second Avdiivka drone was deployed, which is already heading towards the map with filigree precision. This time, the drone flies inside the combat vehicle. Inside the BMP there are ammunition that begin to detonate and explode. The blast wave rips through the armor, destroying everything inside. Seconds later, all that remains of the armored vehicle is burning debris. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit demonstrated the moment of the destruction of a Russian KAMAZ, which was transporting ammunition to artillerymen in the vicinity of Avdiivka. This KAMAZ was part of a supply chain designed to provide the enemy with shells for their artillery, but Ukrainian determination and skill thwarted these plans. Russian logistics around Avdiivka are reported to be under constant strain. and it is through actions such as the destruction of this KAMAZ that the Ukrainian military continues to demonstrate its ability to disrupt supply chains and impede its operations. This video shows one of many examples of the successful use of a conventional Avdiivka drone by the Ukrainian military. The destruction of a full KAMAZ with ammunition significantly hampered the supply of shells to the front line, affecting the enemy's shortage of ammunition and slowing down his actions at the front. This was especially important on the way to the firing positions, where the enemy was preparing to strike the positions of the Ukrainian defenders. But thanks to such actions, he was unable to carry out his plans. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military showed the moment when two Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drones took turns attacking two Russian buggies, which were both in motion along with personnel and transporting ammunition and provisions in the vicinity of Avdiivka. It is reported that in the first video, soldiers of the 25th Separate Airborne Brigade showed the moment how an FPV drone flies up to a Russian buggy, where in the back of the buggy there was one Russian military man who was trying to shoot down a Ukrainian kamikaze drone, and the driver and passenger were sitting in front. The Ukrainian military did not immediately attack the Russian vehicle, as they were patiently waiting for the right moment to attack. Unfortunately, the video in the first moment did not record the very moment of the explosion on the Russian buggy. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely fighters from Unit 2 of the Special Operations Center of the Ukrainian Security Forces, together with the support of the Sternenko community, carried out a successful operation to strike a checkpoint on the left bank of the Dnieper. As a result of the attack, a Russian Ural truck and a pickup truck, which were moving from the front zone to the rear, were also damaged. It is reported that the Russian checkpoint was first attacked, where there were up to 10 Russian military personnel, as well as several people on the street nearby. The Ukrainian military accurately hit the checkpoint, neutralizing the threat of enemy forces. Then the Russian Ural truck came into the sights of Ukrainian FPV drones. As a result of the attack, the truck was destroyed, but the moment of the explosion itself was not recorded since the actions developed very quickly. The last target of the attack was a pickup truck, which was moving along a forest belt on the left bank of the Dnieper. The video shows how a Ukrainian drone accurately hits a pickup truck, causing a powerful explosion. The driver of the pickup truck died on the spot along with his passengers. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely fighters from the Company of Attack Unmanned Aerial Vehicles Sharp Karchizy showed the moment of the destruction of a Russian Loaf, which was transporting ammunition to artillerymen closer to their firing positions. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movement of a Russian Loaf loaded with ammunition along one of the roads in the north of the Kharkov region near the village of Globokha. The situation is such that this truck is heading towards the position of the Russian artillerymen, trying to supply them with additional shells. In the first part of the recording, you can see how a Russian Loaf rides along a road surrounded by small forest belts. It is obvious that the enemy is unaware of the impending threat. Once the truck reaches its stop and the ammunition begins to be unloaded, the kamikaze drone is released with pinpoint precision. Video footage shows the FPV drone speeding towards its target, carefully maneuvering between trees and other obstacles. Seconds later, a powerful explosion occurs, instantly engulfing the truck in flames. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military showed the moment how, with the help of an FPV kamikaze drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders, from which fire was fired from a man-portable anti-aircraft missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian forces. It is reported that the video shows how a Russian military man with manpads settled in a strategically advantageous position at a commanding height in one of the multi-story buildings. This position provided them with a wide view and the ability to effectively attack Ukrainian air targets. However, they did not notice the kamikaze drone flying towards them. The video begins with a drone controlled by the Ukrainian military silently approaching the target. A drone operator using the Avdiivka capabilities of the device to remain undetected until the last moment. The results of the attack are impressive, where one Russian military man was killed on the spot, and 3 nearby were injured of varying degrees of severity. The air attack not only eliminated the immediate threat to Ukrainian troops, there was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, the fighters of the Ronin unit of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated a curious, and at the same time tragic incident that happened to the Russian military. In this episode, one of them tried to escape from an attack by a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone by putting a washing machine lid on his head, hoping that it would protect him. He first stood on the street and smoked, and then stood at the front door, observing the situation. At this time, his comrade was sitting inside the building on the right. The Ukrainian military assessed the situation and immediately launched an Avdiivka drone in their direction. Sensing an approaching threat, the Russian military man hurriedly ran into the building and grabbed the first thing he could get his hands on, namely the top part of an old washing machine. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, he placed it over his head, probably believing that the metal cap would save him. Meanwhile, the second Russian soldier continued to sit pressed against the wall, without taking any action. Unfortunately, the moment of the explosion was not recorded on video. The operational situation did not allow us to raise a second drone to film from a different angle. However, it is safe to say that the attack was successful and caused damage incompatible with life. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, fighters of the Ronin unit of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated an alternate attack on 2 Russian vehicles with military personnel using Avdiivka drones in the vicinity of Robotino. The video reportedly begins with footage captured by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. He records the movement of the Russian loaf with the military, which is driving along a field road. Russian soldiers were heading from a combat position to the rear to regroup. However, their plans were thwarted thanks to the intervention of Ukrainian fighters. A Ukrainian Avdiivka drone crashes into a Russian car at full speed. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the soldiers of the Gryphon unit of the 501st Separate Marine Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying 5 Russian infantrymen using an Avdiivka drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of 5 Russian infantrymen across an open area. As it turned out later, they were heading to a garage cooperative, where one of the garages of local residents was used as a transfer point. When Russian soldiers ran into the garage, the operators of the Ukrainian Avdiivka drone decided to act immediately. The garage door was still open, allowing the drone to fly inside without obstruction. This decision was strategically important, since an attack in an enclosed space significantly increased the chances of success, increasing the lethality of explosion fragments. Next comes the moment of attack, where the Avdiivka drone is precisely aimed at the open garage door, and produces a powerful explosion. The explosion was so strong that, according to preliminary data, at least several Russian infantrymen were seriously injured, and the rest were probably liquidated. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit showed the moment how, with the help of an Avdiivka drone, they destroyed the positions of Russian drone operators who launched Avdiivka drones from this location at the positions of the Ukrainian military near a populated area Novobahmutovka Point. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed drone footage of Russian drone operators hiding in the basement, which they specially disguised with garbage and part of the door because there was nowhere else to hide. Further, in the footage shown, we can see how one Russian drone operator climbs out of the basement, which is camouflaged behind piles of garbage and part of the door. and he takes his FPV drone, which he landed on the road on a flat surface. After this, the Ukrainian military begins an attack in 2 passes using FPV drones, which strike the basement where the Russian FPV drone operators are hiding. As a result, after the first hit of the FPV drone, a powerful explosion occurs, as a result of which the explosion causes heavy damage to all Russian operators who were hiding in the basement. And behind it comes the second final strike by an FPV drone, which finally folded the cover and covered the entrance to the Russian military. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely fighters of the Griffin unmanned aerial vehicle Unit 501 successfully destroyed the Russian Dugout. As a result of an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone, the Dugout burned down along with the Russian military personnel located there. The video begins with footage of a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, which captures 4 Russian soldiers sitting in trenches on the left side. Another Russian soldier appears in the frame, heading towards his dugout. Literally 15 minutes later, the Ukrainian military launches an FPV drone in the direction of the Russian dugout, where all the military from the trenches have already gathered. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt Company unit, as part of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a 3-story building with Russian military personnel inside using an FPV drone with an enlarged warhead. It is reported that the video begins with 3 Russian soldiers trying to get inside through a broken window of a 3-story building to their comrades who have already set up a temporary deployment point there. The house is bustling with activity, where you can see how the Russians are preparing for the next operations, not suspecting that they are already being monitored by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. Ukrainian operators waste no time and decide to act immediately. They fly a kamikaze FPV drone with a larger warhead to get maximum effect from the explosion. The drone skillfully maneuvers its way through a broken window on the first floor. A few seconds later, a powerful explosion occurs. The camera captures the moment when one part of the 3-story building turns into a pile of ruins. The rest of the building remains standing, but is damaged so badly that it is only a matter of time before it collapses. The fate of the Russian military inside remains unknown, but there are not many options there. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment of destruction of several units of enemy multiple rocket launchers Hurricane and the moment of detonation of ammunition near the destroyed enemy equipment. It is reported that the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed a video shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found the target, corrected the fire on it, and recorded the result, namely powerful explosions with the scattering of shells from the Uragan multiple launch rocket system. In the first episode, a column of military equipment of the occupiers stopped on the road in the captured settlement. There were 3 arrivals, as a result of which the first 5 cars burned down. Then a battery of multiple launch rocket systems Hurricane with escort vehicles and ammunition was busy near the forest plantation. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Buleva showed video footage showing how Russian infantry was hiding in a destroyed armored personnel carrier, where they equipped an observation post from which they monitored Ukrainian positions and tracked the movement of Ukrainian equipment. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed drone footage of Russian infantry hiding in an already destroyed armored personnel carrier, because there was nowhere else to hide. The Ukrainian military, using reconnaissance from drones, from time to time monitored the movements of Russian troops, who from time to time climb out of a destroyed armored personnel carrier to conduct reconnaissance activities on Ukrainian troops. Next, the attack begins with the Ukrainians using an FPV drone delivering a jewelry strike into the inside of a Russian armored personnel carrier, where the Russian military was resting. And at the last blow, the ammunition detonates. As a result, this causes a powerful explosion, as a result of which the explosion causes severe damage incompatible with life to all Russian soldiers who were hiding in the armored vehicle. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade successfully destroyed a Russian infantry fighting vehicle using the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The video reportedly begins with a Russian infantry fighting vehicle moving across an open area in the opposite direction. It is clear that the assault on Ukrainian positions was not successful, and Russian equipment was forced to retreat. The Ukrainian military assessed the situation and realized that they needed to act quickly and decisively. They prepared the Javelin anti-tank system and took aim at the infantry fighting vehicle. The rocket was launched, and the tension increased with every second of flight. Viewers of the video could see the missile rapidly approaching the target. A few moments later, a powerful explosion is heard and the missile accurately hits the infantry fighting vehicle. As a result of the hit, a powerful explosion occurs, which causes serious concussion among the BAMP crew members. News from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade from the Javelin anti-tank missile system destroyed a tank of the Russian invaders along with its crew, which was going to break through the Ukrainian defense line, but fate decreed otherwise. It is reported that according to the information received, the Ukrainian military managed to hit a tank of the Russian occupiers, which had additional protection installed on the turret, designed to repel attacks using anti-tank missile systems. Video footage from an unmanned aerial vehicle shows the moment when a Russian tank approaches the positions of Ukrainian forces along a forest belt. However, the Ukrainian military responded promptly. A missile from the Javelin anti-tank system was launched and hit the tank directly under its side turret. It should be noted that the result of using the rocket was amazing. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 46th Separate Airmobile Brigade demonstrated the highest level of skill by destroying two Russian Tu-72E tanks using conventional FPV kamikaze drones during battles near the village of Mer. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone circling the first Russian tank, which is equipped with additional protection on the turret. You can see how the drone maneuvers, assessing the target and choosing the optimal point for attack. At some point, the drone makes a U-turn and rushes towards the tank at full speed. A huge explosion follows, and footage shows the tank being instantly hit. This strike was so accurate that additional protective measures could not save the Russian tank. The video doesn't end here. The second drone is heading towards another Russian tank of the same model. This tank is popularly nicknamed the Barn, which is lined with everything possible. Unlike the first attack, here the tank is not in motion, which makes the task easier for the operators. The drone approaches a stationary target, and at the moment of attack, an even more powerful explosion occurs. So strong that it throws the tank's turret several meters up. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Buleva showed the moment how two Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drones effectively struck Russian vehicles transporting military personnel to the position area near the village of Nekoleki. It is reported that the story of this video begins from the moment when 5 Russian soldiers get into a Russian car in one of the villages of the Donetsk region. The following shows the moment how a Russian car moves from one village in the direction of its positions. But the Ukrainian military did not give them the opportunity to reach the final point as they launched a kamikaze FPV drone. Suddenly and with unexpected force, the kamikaze drone crashes into the car, sending it into a burst of fire. In just a moment, the car bursts into flames like a match, with the crew inside. From this video it becomes clear that all 5 Russian soldiers in the car did not have time to leave the car. A similar trick was demonstrated with a second Russian car. Only in the second car was the exact number of Russian military personnel unknown, but even if there were all 2 of them there, this is also a good result, There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military, with the support of the Turn Back Alive Foundation, successfully carried out an operation to destroy important Russian equipment. With the help of the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system and 2 GM-LRS missiles, it was possible to eliminate their 330 Shaitel electronic warfare complex and the ZU radar station. It is reported that the video of the operation begins with a Shark drone conducting reconnaissance and recording the positions of Russian equipment. The footage shows how Ukrainian drone operators carefully monitor the enemy's movements and transmit coordinates for striking. The electronic warfare complex or 330 Shaitel and the radar ZU are in a well-fortified position, but this does not stop the Ukrainian military. The following shows the moment the HIMARS missiles were launched. 2 high-precision GM-LRS missiles are sent to targets following specified coordinates. A few seconds of tense anticipation and a powerful explosion is visible on the screen. Namely, first one, then the second missile accurately hits the target. The Shaitel electronic warfare system and the Zupark radar are instantly engulfed in flames, which indicates the detonation of ammunition and the complete destruction of enemy equipment. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit demonstrated exceptional skill using anti-tank mines to destroy unusual targets, which were already nicknamed barn tanks. This new phenomenon comes as Russian tanks are being lined with a variety of building materials, from chain link mesh to metal fragments and roofing materials, in an attempt to improve their protection. The video reportedly begins with one of these barn tanks at full speed trying to break through the Ukrainian defenses. The footage shows how a massive car covered with different materials rushes across the field. But its movement abruptly stops as the tank is simultaneously blown up by 6 anti-tank mines installed by Ukrainian soldiers. Powerful explosions instantly stop the tank. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit demonstrated the moment of destruction of a Russian armored KAMAZ truck of the Mustang model, transporting personnel and provisions near the village of Horrifying. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian FPV drone trying to catch up with a Russian armored truck that was carrying 12 people from a combat position to redeployment to the rear. The drone approaches the target, finds a weak spot, and strikes the left wheel. As a result of the explosion, the wheel shatters into pieces and the truck is forced to stop. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launches a second FPV drone. This drone precisely targets the cab of the truck and strikes the driver and his passenger, who have not yet managed to leave the affected area. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers in the back realize that their lives are under threat and rush to leave the car and scatter in different directions. Following this, the Ukrainian military launches a third drone. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Ukrainian military personnel showed the moment how a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, together with infantry, was going to break through the Ukrainian defense line in the vicinity of Avdiivka, but something clearly did not go according to plan. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed video footage from a drone, which shows the moment how a Russian infantry fighting vehicle drives around an already destroyed infantry fighting vehicle with the aim of breaking through Ukrainian defenses in the vicinity of Avdiivka. But literally having driven a little away from the already damaged infantry fighting vehicle, the Russian infantry fighting vehicle is going to unload the infantry from the armored vehicle. And literally at the same minute, a Russian infantry fighting vehicle explodes on an anti-tank mine, which was very similar to the German Parm-1 thermal mine, which subsequently causes a huge explosion and completely destroys Russian armored vehicles. This strike repelled the Russian attack and forced them to retreat from the positions of the Ukrainian troops. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely, the fighters of the Special Operations Center of Group A showed the moment of the destruction of the Russian Ural truck along with the crew, which was transporting ammunition to the artillerymen closer to their firing positions near the village of Krinky. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed one of the examples of the successful use of a conventional FPV drone, where they destroyed a full Ural truck transporting ammunition to their artillerymen to positions near the village of Krinky. The Ukrainian military without hesitation stopped the truck using an FPV drone, thereby complicating the ammunition supply chain in this direction. And most importantly, it significantly affects the front line, which is already experiencing a significant shortage of ammunition. This happened on the way to the firing position, where the enemy was going to fire these shells at the positions of the Ukrainian defenders who were trying to expand the bridgehead near the village of Krinky. There was excellent news from the Charkov direction, namely, the Grum aerial reconnaissance fighters showed a strike from the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system on a Russian brigade that was building fortifications several kilometers from the contact line. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the construction of fortifications by the Russian military. The footage shows a truck crane based on a KAMAZ Mustang truck, several other Russian trucks, and a large number of soldiers and workers engaged in construction. It is noteworthy that Russian electronic warfare systems were unable to stop the Ukrainian drone, which made it possible to record everything that was happening from above. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, decided to use the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. This system is equipped with ammunition with 182,000 tungsten balls, which provides significant damage within the impact radius. At the moment of the attack shown in the video, it becomes obvious how effective this blow was. The result of the impact is visible in the subsequent frames. The area where construction work was carried out was turned into ruins. Russian forces suffered serious losses, equipment was damaged and disabled. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters from a company of attack unmanned aerial vehicles of the 2nd Mechanized Brigade showed the moment when a Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone attacks a Russian buggy under which a Russian military man was hiding in the hope that he would not be noticed there. It is reported that a Russian military man disguised as a buggy surrounded by nature and vegetation turned out to be invisible to many, but not to Ukrainian drones. The Russian military, hoping for a quiet flight in the shadow of the buggy, did not expect such an attack. But Ukrainian drone operators, thanks to advanced technology and precise reconnaissance, saw it hiding under a vehicle. And now the moment of truth comes, namely, the Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone makes a div attack, heading straight towards the Russian buggy. In a moment of tension, the drone gets closer to the target, and the military man perhaps begins to realize that their secret plan has failed. The drone approaches and, having made an accurate hit, delivers a devastating blow. The Russian buggy explodes, sending a cloud of dust and smoke flying in all directions as the drone operators watch the outcome of their mission. And there was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters from a company of attack unmanned aerial vehicles of the 2nd Mechanized Brigade performed an impressive feat, destroying the most modern tank of the Russian Army 90 breakthrough using a conventional FPV kamikaze drone during battles in the village of Solovyevo Donetsk region. It is reported that the presented video footage from a drone shows the approach of the Russian tank 90 Proryev to the positions of Ukrainian forces in the village of Solovyev. At the same time, while moving, the Russian tank opens fire in the direction of the Ukrainian forces, but it is worth noting that this is a very dangerous position for the tank, namely to fire in open areas without any support. Meanwhile, Ukrainian FPV drone operators launched a kamikaze drone into the sky to eliminate an enemy tank. The following shows the first moment the FPV drone hit a Russian tank, which stopped its advance, but did not completely destroy it. After this, immediately after it, a second FPV drone hits the tank, which has already engulfed it in flames as a result of the explosion. Based on this video, we can conclude that the crew members remained in the tank forever. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Russian military themselves demonstrated video footage of their unsuccessful tank assault on Ukrainian positions. Of the 6 Russian tanks, 5 were blown up in a minefield near the village of Spornoy. He hits another mine, which leads to a powerful explosion and subsequent detonation of the ammunition. A huge explosion destroys the tank and its debris scatters in different directions. In the video, the remaining tanks in the column can be seen, confused and demoralized, trying to maneuver to avoid the fate of their comrades. But the attempts were in vain. 2 more tanks ran into mines, leading to similar consequences: damage, smoke, and the need for repairs. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit carried out a successful ambush on a Russian convoy consisting of 2 armored combat vehicles and 1 tank. The operation reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. Ukrainian fighters took up strategic positions in advance to ensure the effect of surprise and maximum effectiveness of the attack. When the Russian column entered the affected area, Ukrainian forces immediately launched an attack. Artillery and FPV drones were the first to enter the battle, unleashing a barrage of fire on the enemy. Artillery strikes were aimed at creating chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the enemy. FPV drones equipped with explosives accurately hit targets, destroying armor and disabling equipment. Following this, Ukrainian forces used anti-tank missile systems aimed at armored vehicles and a tank. Accurate missile strikes destroyed the armored vehicles, leaving the enemy no chance of salvation. From intercepted enemy conversations, it became known that as a result of this operation, losses among Russian military personnel exceeded 20 people. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the Eyes of Retribution Inquisition units of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, the 55th Separate Artillery Brigade and the 79th Separate Air Assault Brigade successfully ambushed a Russian mechanized column near the city of Krasnogorodka. The video shot by a Ukrainian drone reportedly shows the movement of a group of Russian armored vehicles, including 1 T-72 tank, 1 T-80 tank and 3 infantry fighting vehicles, all equipped with additional turtle armor. A Russian column advances across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. When they enter the range of Ukrainian artillery, shelling begins. The first artillery strikes are carried out, but unfortunately the explosions occur a few meters from the targets. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, understands that artillery will not be able to effectively hit the entire column. So they decide to use FPV drones. This tactic proves successful, with some Russian armored vehicles being blown up by mines pre-planted along the way, some vehicles hit by artillery fire, but the bulk of the work being done by kamikaze drones. Explosions hit cars, causing fires and destruction. The Russian military personnel who were in the armored vehicles find themselves in panic. Some of them manage to leave the damaged vehicles and try to escape, but many remain in their burning combat vehicles. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely a Russian tank breakthrough occurred where, during a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense, a Russian tank was blown up by an anti-tank mine, as a result of which the ammunition detonated. The Ukrainian military reportedly demonstrated its readiness and foresight by proactively planting anti-tank mines on a road behind enemy lines. This strategic decision was determined not only by knowledge of the terrain, but also by the analysis of intelligence information about possible enemy routes. The explosion of a Russian tank served as a striking example of the effectiveness of such security measures. The detonation of the tank's ammunition after an explosion on a mine was a serious blow to the attacking forces, preventing a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense and damaging the enemy's combat capability. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Ukrainian strike operators showed a moment filmed by a drone showing a daring attempt by Russian forces to pull back their damaged tank on the line of combat contact with the help of an armored tractor. The video begins with a drone spotting a Russian armored tractor attempting to evacuate a previously damaged Russian tank. The tank, which had clearly received significant damage in previous battles, stands motionless when a tractor approaches it. When the armored tractor begins to move, FPV drone operators decide to take action. The first drone heads towards the target, quickly maneuvering towards the tractor. At the moment of impact, an explosion occurs which disables the front part of the car, stopping its movement. Russian soldiers who were near the equipment are confused and try to take cover. The Ukrainian military does not stop there. The second FPV drone immediately launches and overtakes the remaining stationary tractor. Another explosion and the armored vehicle is completely out of action, leaving the tank and tractor on the battlefield. Russian troops, realizing that the evacuation attempt has failed, are forced to abandon their equipment and retreat under the onslaught of Ukrainian attack drones. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the fighters of the 201st Separate Territorial Defense Battalion showed the moment of the destruction of the Russian Ural truck on which the cannon was destroyed in order to destroy Ukrainian drones or drones in the sky. The scene reportedly revolved around the destruction of a Russian Ural truck, which was mounted with a cannon to shoot down Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles or drones in the air. The first arrival of Ukrainian FPV drones on a Russian truck occurred at the moment when the cannon was firing at the Ukrainian drone. This moment left no chance for the Russian truck, and the second drone arrival occurred after the first hit, when the Russian truck tried to change its position to avoid the strike. Following this scenario, a Russian infantry fighting vehicle arrived on site to evacuate the wounded crew from the Ural truck. However, a Ukrainian FPV drone was also launched at it. Although the drone missed slightly, its presence created additional pressure on Russian forces and complicated the situation for rescuing the wounded. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Ostrikarsky unit showed the moment of the destruction of the Russian Ural truck, which was transporting ammunition to the artillerymen closer to their firing positions. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed one of the examples of the successful use of a conventional FPV drone, where it destroyed a full Ural truck transporting ammunition to its artillerymen. The Ukrainian military without hesitation stopped the truck using an FPV drone, thereby complicating the ammunition supply chain within the Russian army. And most importantly, it significantly affects the front line, which is already experiencing a significant shortage of ammunition. This happened in an open area where a Russian truck was heading to one of the forest plantations where the enemy was going to fire these shells at the positions of the Ukrainian military, but did not have time. The video was shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found the target, as it moved, transmitted the exact coordinates to the fighters, and recorded the hit. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated a brilliant confrontation in close combat between a Ukrainian Bradley fighting vehicle and a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry. It is reported that the video begins with a Russian armored personnel carrier with troops on board at full speed trying to break through Ukrainian positions in the Pokrovsky direction in order to gain a foothold in one of the nearby villages. However, their attempt was quickly stopped, since an American Bradley, driven by a Ukrainian crew, was already waiting for them on the road. As soon as the Ukrainian crew noticed the movement of Russian armored vehicles, they immediately opened fire. The Russian armored personnel carrier in turn returned fire at the Ukrainian armored vehicle. Meanwhile, the Bradley continued to attack the Russian armored personnel carrier, despite having a so-called barbecue of homemade protection attached to the top of the armor, presumably to protect against FPV drone attacks. However, in this case, this protection could not prevent the accurate and destructive attacks of the American Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. During the attack, several paratroopers fell from the Russian armored personnel carrier. The armored vehicle began to smoke heavily, and, after traveling a short distance, stopped due to inertia. Russian paratroopers, who miraculously managed to survive the Bradley shelling, tried to hide in a destroyed house. Whether they managed to escape remains in question, but one thing is clear: about 70% of the assault group was eliminated by one Bradley, which is an impressive result. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt crew of the 2nd Mechanized Battalion of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated outstanding skill in combat operations, destroying Russian armored vehicles heading to attack Ukrainian positions near the village of Novobakhmutov. It is reported that the video obtained thanks to unmanned reconnaissance clearly shows how the Russian infantry fighting vehicle accompanied by infantry moved forward trying to break through the Ukrainian defense line. Russian infantry disembarks from an armored personnel carrier preparing to capture positions in a forested area. However, the American Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, which was on guard, was ready to meet the enemy. Noticing the movement of Russian armored vehicles, she instantly opened fire. Bradley did not stop attacking the Russian infantry fighting vehicle, even despite the presence of a barbecue attached to the top of the armor of the Russian vehicle. This grille was supposed to serve as protection against attacks by Ukrainian FPV drones, but in this case it could not interfere with the actions of the American Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Thanks to the accurate and consistent shots fired by the Ukrainian crew, the Russian infantry fighting vehicle was heavily damaged. As a result, the armored personnel carrier caught fire and eventually detonated as Russian infantry ammunition remained inside the vehicle before it could be unloaded. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit brilliantly destroyed the most modern tank of the Russian invaders, the 90 mm worth $1 million, using an ordinary civilian drone near Avdiivka. It is reported that the fighters of the Shadow unit demonstrated a high level of skill, having mastered the technique of using civilian unmanned aerial vehicles for military purposes. A situation where it is necessary to drop a grenade into the open hatch of an armored vehicle from a drone not equipped with an aiming system is indeed a considerable challenge. Also, installing electronic warfare equipment on the tank added even more complexity to the task. Typically, such tools would interfere with the normal functioning of unmanned vehicles, but Shadow fighters demonstrated a deep understanding of such systems and found ways to circumvent their effects. This may have included the use of alternative frequencies or the use of tactical ploys to fool the electronic warfare system. As a result, due to the successful use of an unmanned aerial vehicle equipped with a grenade, the Russian tank was completely destroyed, and the crew members faced an imminent threat to their lives. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit brilliantly destroyed a tank of the Russian invaders 7263mm model 2022 worth $1 million using an ordinary civilian drone near Avdiivka. It is reported that members of the Shadow unit have demonstrated the highest level of skill in effectively using civilian unmanned aerial vehicles to carry out military missions. They were faced with an unusual situation where they needed to drop a grenade into the open hatch of an armored vehicle using a drone without an aiming system, which presented a serious challenge. In addition, the presence of electronic warfare equipment on the tank complicated the task. Typically, such systems interfere with the normal operation of unmanned vehicles, but the members of the Shadow unit demonstrated a deep understanding of this problem and found ways to circumvent its impact. This may have included the use of alternative frequencies or tactical ploys to fool the electronic warfare system. Thanks to the successful use of an unmanned aerial vehicle with a grenade, the Russian tank was completely destroyed and its crew members faced a serious threat to their lives. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction. Namely, the fighters of the Gryphon Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Unit 501 demonstrated an impressive moment when 6 Russian armored vehicles tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line in the vicinity of Avdiivka. The video reportedly begins with footage of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle firing at Ukrainian positions. Suddenly, a Ukrainian FPV drone flies into this armored vehicle, causing a powerful explosion and destruction of the vehicle. The next episode shows a similar attack, where an FPV drone attacks an infantry fighting vehicle that is trying to take cover in the forest. As a result of the strike, the armored vehicle is also destroyed, and one of the crew members manages to leave the vehicle at the last moment. The video then shows two Russian tanks paired together attempting to break through the Ukrainian defense line. One of the tanks becomes a target for an Avdiivka drone, which flies directly into the area of the gas tanks. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the strike drone unit of the 100th Separate Mechanized Brigade Voron showed how, with the help of two Avdiivka drones, they destroyed the positions of Russian drone operators who were launching Avdiivka drones from this location at the positions of the Ukrainian military. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian surveillance drone capturing 9 Russian drone operators hiding in local residents' garages. They probably chose this hiding place, considering it safe and inconspicuous. The video begins with one of the Russian cameramen leaving the garage to pick up his Avdiivka drone, which he landed near the gate. At this moment, the attack of the Ukrainian military begins. The first Avdiivka drone quickly approaches the target and explodes, causing a massive explosion that destroys the entire structure of the garage down to the foundation. Russian operators hiding inside are trapped under the rubble. The power of the explosion was so great that the remains of the building scattered in different directions. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, using Avdiivka drones, brilliantly destroyed Russian drone operators who were trying to gain a foothold in various houses of local residents in the vicinity of Avdiivka. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces razed several houses to the foundations in which Russian drone operators were trying to gain a foothold. The destruction of the Russian drone operators who were trying to hide from the Ukrainian Avdiivka drones began with 6 Russian soldiers scattered and hiding in various destroyed houses of local residents. But with the help of Avdiivka drones, the Ukrainian operator was able to brilliantly fly into the window and deal a fatal blow to 2 Russian military personnel in turn with the help of flying fragments at the moment of the explosion. Then a similar situation occurs with 3 more Russian military personnel, only in this case a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone flew through the front door. And finally, there was a third case, where the concept of striking remained the same as in the first case. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit demonstrated the moment how a Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone strikes a Russian US-type vehicle in which there were 3 Russian soldiers. It is reported that the story of this video begins with the destruction of a Russian US-type vehicle, in which there were 3 Russian military men who were waiting for their 4th comrade. However, surprising events confirm that fate had its own plans, and the Ukrainian kamikaze Avdiivka drone played a role in this story. The video footage taken by the drone shows it heading towards a Russian US-type vehicle. Suddenly and with unexpected force, the kamikaze drone crashes into the car, sending it into a burst of fire. In just a moment, the car bursts into flames like a match, with the crew inside. From this video it becomes clear that none of the military had time to leave the car. The impact of the Avdiivka drone was so sharp and unexpected that there was simply no time to react. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Signum unit of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an acute and tense moment where a Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone was trying to strike a moving Russian quad bike with a trailer. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone chasing a Russian quad bike. 2 Russian military men are sitting on it, and at least 2 Russian military men are lying in the trailer. But despite the driver's desperate attempts to maneuver, the quad bike cannot escape the attack. The drone is precisely aimed and crashes directly into the quad bike driver from the side, causing a massive explosion. As a result of the explosion, the driver's lower limb is immediately torn off in order to comply with censorship rules, and in order not to injure viewers, the most tragic moment was blurred out on video. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, The fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and the operators of the Strike Drones Company unit demonstrated an impressive attack moment when they managed to hit the Russian military. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording 3 Russian military personnel in the village of Solovyo. 2 of them lead the third, who is obviously wounded by hand. They carefully make their way to the stabilization aid station located in a concrete hangar. The situation around them is calm, and it would seem that nothing portends trouble. However, a Ukrainian FPV drone is already circling in the sky, carefully monitoring the movements of the Russian military. As soon as they enter the hangar, the drone operator immediately directs the device to the target. Seconds later, an explosion is heard as the drone crashes into a concrete building. Following the first drone, the second, third, and finally the fourth drone are sent to the hangar. Each of them hits the target precisely, creating a series of powerful explosions. These attacks cause significant damage inside the hangar. The Russian soldiers inside were at least additionally injured by flying shrapnel, and possibly worse. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the fighters of the 35th Separate Marine Brigade demonstrated exceptional skill, using 2 FPV drones to eliminate 2 Russian intelligence officers who hid in the garage of local residents in one of the villages of the Kherson region. The first footage reportedly shows 2 Russian soldiers walking through the streets of the village in search of trophies. However, their walk was interrupted when they noticed a Ukrainian drone monitoring their movements. Quickly realizing that they were under close surveillance, the Russian military tried to hide in a garage on one of the local residents' property, probably to ensure their safety. The Ukrainian drone operators wasted no time and immediately decided to act. By synchronously launching 2 FPV drones, the first of them penetrated the garage window from the street side, and the second through the gate from the yard side. The result of these 2 successful attacks was a collapsed building buried under the rubble of the Russian military. Thus, the threat posed by these soldiers was effectively eliminated, and the operation emphasized the high level of training and professionalism of Ukrainian fighters. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, soldiers of the Griffin unit of the 501st Separate Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated successful attacks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones on the Russian military in the vicinity of the city of Volchansk. The video begins with 6 Russian soldiers entering the house of local residents, trying to hide from Ukrainian drones and not attract unnecessary attention on the street. However, their attempt to escape was unsuccessful, as a large number of cars parked near the house immediately attracted the attention of Ukrainian drone operators. An attack soon follows, where a kamikaze drone approaches the building and a powerful explosion occurs, destroying the hiding military. The attack doesn't end there. The next shot shows a Ukrainian drone dropping explosive ammunition directly into a hole in the roof of one of the buildings where Russian troops were also stationed. Precision bombing results in another explosion, causing significant damage to the enemy. In one of the episodes, a kamikaze drone attacks working equipment engaged in the construction of trenches and fortifications for Russian troops in the suburbs of Volchansk. The explosion destroys the equipment, disrupting plans to strengthen defensive positions. And the last episode of the video is especially impressive, where a drone attacks a basement that a Russian military man has just entered. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, soldiers of the 38th Separate Marine Brigade successfully eliminated the deployment point of Russian FPV drone operators in the village of Krinky on the left bank of the Dnieper. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting the location of Russian drone operators. On a tree near the building where they settled, an antenna was noticeable, designed to improve communications. The footage shows one of the Russian soldiers running out of the house to pick up his FPV drone, which he had previously landed on the ground near the house. Then he quickly returns back, trying not to attract too much attention to himself. The Ukrainian military assesses the situation and decides to attack. Several Ukrainian FPV drones take turns striking the building where Russian operators were hiding. As a result of precise strikes, the building was completely destroyed. This complex protected an important Russian military point from missile attacks by Ukrainian forces in the city of Donetsk. The video reportedly begins with a Russian OSA air defense missile system moving through the narrow private streets of Donetsk. The complex is seen likely changing its position to remain less vulnerable to detection and attack. The movement is carried out quite carefully, which indicates the importance and danger of this technique for the enemy. At some point, the WASP stops at the edge of the road, probably to carry out some manipulations or rest the crew. It was this moment that the Ukrainian military took advantage of. Quickly assessing the situation and realizing that delay could cost them a missed opportunity, they decide to attack. The video shows how the Ukrainian FPV drone begins to move towards the stopped air defense system. The drone operator skillfully guides the drone to its target, avoiding obstacles and keeping it at the lowest possible altitude to avoid detection. A few seconds later, the moment of attack occurs, where the drone crashes into the WASP, and an explosion immediately follows. Further in the video, footage is shown that shows how the Russian air defense system begins to smoke and burn.